Hey everybody, and welcome back to Big Buck Shuck, where our goal is to help you become a more successful and better deer hunter. Today's show is going to be all about one of the great debates of deer hunting, and that's broadheads. Specifically, mechanical broadheads versus fixed blades. Now, how many times have you heard someone say, what do you shoot, mechanical, expandable, or fixed blades? Or have you seen on your Facebooks or forums where guys are arguing back and forth, which is better, fixed blades and mechanicals? You've seen it, I've seen it, it's all over the place, it's beat to death, but it's one of those Chevy versus Ford arguments in our hunting community. And I just wanted to make this video to help you decide what should be your choice for broadheads, so that when the moment of truth comes, you have trust in that broadhead, and you know that it's gonna work, perform as best as it can for your setup. Now, this has been a problem since mechanical broadheads were first being made. They started being made back in the 1950s and first commercially being available in the 1980s by Rocket Broadheads. And a lot of this is dependent on what your setup is. So a guy that shoots a recurve is going to shoot a totally different broadhead than a 400 or 500 feet per second crossbow hunter. So a lot of it depends on your bow. It depends on your draw weight, your draw length, depends on what, like I said, compound, recurve, crossbow. So fixed blades are going to perform no matter what. They're made to cut on contact. You have the same size entry hole as you do your exit hole if there is one. So these are more for lower poundage bows, like kids, women, people that can't draw much weight back. And these guys are generally going to perform no matter what, unless, you know, they can break just like a mechanical, but generally speaking, these are going to perform in whatever you shoot, whether you shoot a recurve, longbow, compound, crossbow, these are going to perform regardless. As with a mechanical, it takes energy to open these blades. This is a rear deploy broadhead. It has shoulders here that when the broadhead hits the animal's skin, it deploys these broadheads back like this. They can fully open upon entry, so they're open instantly. Whereas and there's also over-the-top expandables that the blades actually fold back. Once it hits the animal, the blades deploy back like this. So that takes a lot those would be like your Spitfires, your Grim Reapers. Those are the over-the-top expandables. These rear deploying broadheads, this one specifically is a Rage, but there's a bunch of other ones. I mean, there's Muzzies, there's NAPs, there's all kinds of them. And I have no affiliation with any of them, so these are just a couple that I had. I don't even have an over-the-top expandable because I don't use them. So, but yeah, these require these require more energy than a fixed blade to open. So these are going to be better suited for your higher poundage bows, your longer draws, higher draw weights, crossbows, because you need that extra energy to open these. Every time these hit something, it takes energy out of that momentum of that arrow to open these blades, whether it's a rear deploy or an over the top. So you got to make sure that whatever your setup is, it's suitable to use a broadhead for that setup, or you got to pick the broadhead that's suitable for your setup. So women and kids that are shooting compounds, recurves, no question, fixed blade. I mean, if you're shooting, I'm gonna say, this is just my opinion, I'm gonna say under 50 pounds on your bow, I would use a cut on contact fixed blade, and probably like a two blade, like a Magnus Stinger, something like that, or a buzz cut that is a two blade that's gonna just find its way right through the animal. With the least amount of energy taken out of it. So that way you have the most penetration. You want that entry and exit hole. You don't just want to stick it in with one hole and and hope, you know, that it gets in there and does its job. So any lower poundage bows, you're going to want to cut on contact broadhead. So like I said, these rear deploying broadheads, they require less energy than the over the top expandables to open. So, you know, if you're shooting 50 to 70 pounds, these are good for those, you know, or for crossbows, they work in either. But crossbows are a different animal because there's so much energy, they're so fast. I mean, you can almost shoot anything out of them and they're gonna work, they're gonna do the job. So for that 50 to 70 pound range, these are good. I mean, you can use the over the tops. I personally don't recommend them because they do require the energy to open, and you only have the one exit hole is the size of the broadhead once it's open. The entry hole on the over the top expandables is basically just a little bit bigger than a field point. I mean, because it's not opening until it's past the skin of the animal. So if you don't get a pass-through shot with an over-the-top mechanical broadhead, you only have that one little bullet hole, entry hole. So, and that's why if you're shooting a high poundage bow, you know, 70 plus pounds, or a crossbow, those will work fine, because it's probably more than likely going to blow right through the deer if you have a good, you know, behind the shoulder ribcage shot. But if you hit that shoulder with a mechanical, I mean, with really anything, you hit that shoulder and you're in trouble. But at least with these fixed blades, you are going to penetrate, you have a better chance of penetrating versus one of these expandables because of all the energy it takes to open these. Now, whether or not you shoot a fixed or expandable is totally up to you. You figure out what works for you, and that's what we all have to do, but in the end, it's a personal preference. I mean, as long as you have, you know that if you're shooting a light poundage bow, or, you know, a recurve or long bows, if you're shooting something like that, if your kid's going out hunting and they're 8 years old, they can only pull back 30 pounds or 40, don't set them up for failure with one of these. Just don't. Use a cut on contact broadhead for kids and light poundage bows. Most women, you know, don't draw a lot of weight back, so use a cut on contact broadhead. This happens to be a Montec, a G5 Montec. These are one of my favorite broadheads. It's a solid piece of steel. There's no way that this is gonna fail. It's gonna cut every single time, and I've shot 3 and 4 deer with one broadhead before, and without sharpening it, I probably should have sharpened it, but the point being, I have shot multiple deer with one of these heads. This range here, when I did shoot these, I shot one deer with this broadhead, and you can't really see it, but maybe you can. This blade is bent, and it's also got a bunch of chips out of the blade, so not that it didn't do its job, it did. These are great broadheads. When they work, they are devastating. They work very well, perform great, as do, I've seen the NA Peak, I think it's the Kill Zone. I've seen guys use those and they work great. Huge blood trails. I mean, you can't beat the blood trail that you get with a big expandable. You know, you're getting 1.5 to 2 inch cuts. You get an awesome, like somebody walked out with a bucket of paint, blood trail. I mean, it's so, but you also get that with these. I mean, if you put it in the right spot. But these are really good, but I'm going to tell you a couple stories of why I don't use these anymore. And again, this is all just personal preference and just trying to help you guys decide if you're on the fence. So the reason why I switched, back when these first came out, I was young. I was in my teens probably. They were all the rage, pun intended. And So I got on the bandwagon. I got these when they first come out, and I used them. And I probably killed, I don't know, 15 to 20 deer with these. And like I said, when these work, any of these rear deploying broadheads, when they work, they work. I mean, you don't track very far. They're awesome. So I killed probably 15, 20 deer with those. And then I had a couple situations where I shot a basket rack 5-point back when I was younger, you know, still really getting my first bucks under my belt and all that. But I shot this basket rack 5-point. He come down the hill. He was right there at like 18 yards. I ranged it after I shot him. And I shot him, and I remember that it's one of the things it's in your head, it's burned in there. I hit that deer squarely in the body, behind his shoulder. His leg was forward. It was perfect. So I thought. Back then I was using, I think I had it was either my PSE or my switchback, I can't remember, but I was shooting like 55 pounds back then. And when I shot that deer, I thought it was perfect. He ran up the hill back the way he came. I got down, I started tracking blood, there was good blood. And it got to a point where I was, I don't know, 300 or 400 yards. And I'm like, man, this deer should be dead. You know, there's no reason for this right now. So got a buddy, we went out, tracked it. He hit the river and we lost blood. We went to the other side, and we never found him. And about 2 weeks later, my grandpa had talked to a neighbor down the road, and he said, hey, do you know anybody with fancy, expensive arrows? He said, my grandpa, you know, I don't know why, you know, whatever. And the guy says, yeah, I found this buck, and he was dead on the side of my bank. He had riverfront property down the road, and he said he was dead on the side of my bank, and he had this real expensive arrow in him, and he described the arrow, and it was my feathers, you know, the color of my nocks, everything. It was the deer that I shot. Well, he fell in the river and died and floated down about, I don't know, 600-700 yards down the river and caught up on a log, and that guy found him up on his bank. So that was the first time that, you know, I really got pissed off about these broadheads, because, you know, I lost a deer, and I can't attribute it to much else. I mean, like I said, it was 18 yards. It was broadside, leg forward. I didn't think that. I mean, I thought I could have threw a rock and killed that deer, you know. So that really burned my ass. And so after that, I continued to use them because they do work great when they do work. And so 2 years ago, this would have been in 2020, I shot a buck. I was hunting out on some state land out by Gladwin Roads area, up here in Michigan. And this nice 8-point, he come through. It was like mid-October, and it was funny. There was 3 bucks. There was him, like a smaller 4 or 6, and a spike horn. And they come through, kind of caught me off guard. I was looking off to my left, and they come from, I didn't expect them to come from that way, as they usually do, out in front of me. So I swung around, and I drew, and I rushed, shot, made a bad shot. I hit him back, right behind his rib cage, you know, not full-blown guts, but back, you know, in the back of his liver. I rushed the shot, messed it up. So shot him, he took off. I started tracking. I couldn't find any blood. No blood. I grid searched the area, could not find a drop. So I called a dog tracker. This is the first time I'd ever used one. And he showed up the next day. We went out there and we're tracking this deer. And the dog he was right on the deer's path. I mean, he was on the deer that I shot's path where he went. Because where he disappeared into the woods is where that dog took us. And took us out onto a couple of islands across this cattail marsh. It was a mess. We were in waist deep, well, probably knee deep water. You know, my boots were full. The dog tracker's waders were almost, or his hip boots were sketchy in a couple of spots. So we went to the first island, down through the marsh again, second island, and by that time he says, look man, my dog's, he can't do it. There's no blood. Like, this deer is probably gonna be fine, or he's gonna die somewhere, and just is what it is kind of thing. So that was my last straw. So after that deer, and the dog tracker actually asked me when we were tracking, he said, what kind of broadhead are you using? And I said, a 2-blade Rage. And he said, and he went, ugh. And I'm like, what? And he said, something to remember is that when you shoot something and that arrow gets lodged in that animal, if it doesn't pass through and it's in there, okay, when these, and it's over the top expandables as well as rear deploy, when they get in that animal and get through the skin and then past the bone and in there, and if somehow that arrow backs up, that's what they do. The over the top the rear deploy expandables anyway. Okay, that's what they do. If that arrow backs up as the animal's running, that is not cutting anything, because the backside of these blades they don't have a razor edge like the other side. So there's no blades back here that as that animal's running, that's doing this. If that blade's back like that, it isn't doing anything. It's not cutting. It's not, doing any more vital damage to that animal, helping you kill it faster. So that, I never really thought of that before. It made a lot of sense. And so that, coupled with, he says once these fixed blades get in there, first off, it's very hard for that blade to back out at all. These could slip out way easier, and a over the top expandable as well. Once them blades are open on those and it backs up, them blades close, so they can pull right out of the deer if it gets caught on a branch or brush or whatever. He said, whereas these gets in there, and them shoulders, that's like a fish hook almost, where you're not pulling that back out of flesh. I mean, it's not coming back out, and the whole time that animal's moving, this is in there sawing away, because these blades are fixed. They're always out to where they're cutting on something, creating more damage, whether it's internal bleeding, arteries, organs, whatever it is, that's constantly doing that as it's in there. So that made a lot of sense to me, and I never thought about it like that before. And after that, I was really I had my mind made up. Even if I had shot, say, 20 deer with my mechanicals in the past, I'd lost 2. So you're talking 10% of your deer that are gone, like that you didn't get. So to me, I don't like them odds. I don't like those odds at all. We already have all the odds in the world stacked up against us trying to kill these animals, and we don't need any more help. So I switched back to a Montec. I believe I switched to a Montec, and I tried some, what are they called? I can't remember what they're called. They're 3-blade broadhead. Anyway, I switched back to fixed blades because of those reasons. It made a lot of sense, and I was tired. I didn't want to lose any more deer, even if, obviously, 99% of this is all shot placement, right? So if you put a pencil behind the shoulder of a deer, hit through the lungs or the heart, it's gonna die. But it's that 1% margin where everything else has to factor in. Your arrows, your bow, your broadheads, everything. Everything else has to factor in that one little percent. And for me, I'd rather knock that 1% down even further just by using a fixed blade and not risking the chance of any of that happening to me again. So those are the reasons why I use a fixed blade. Now, like I said, these are great. I do like these. I miss the blood trails because they are extremely devastating. They leave massive blood trails. But unless you're shooting a high poundage bow, like I said, I would say 70 plus pounds or a crossbow, I would not use an expandable, a rear deploy expandable, and I especially wouldn't use an over the top expandable. They just take too much energy, and it's not worth risking losing that buck or even that doe. You know, any deer, it's not worth losing just to say, oh, I shoot a mechanical broadhead, or you know, be in that trendy click club. You know, don't do that. Pick what's right for you and use it. And if you shoot one of these and it doesn't work out the way you expect, switch it up. You give these a try. And if you shoot these and you don't like it, what happens, you know, the blades break, they bend, whatever, they're too expensive to mess with, try something else. In the end, it's a lot of it's personal preference. You're gonna figure it out as you go. But in the end, at the end of the day, you guys have to use what you trust. And that's where I'm trying to tell you, for me, is that I trust these way more than I trust a mechanical. So this is what I use. And in the end, that's what you need to do. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's show about these broadheads, the great debate. Hopefully it settled for you, or at least gave you some tips or insights to help you out on your choice here for the upcoming season. And don't forget, if you guys got value out of this, if it helped you out in any way, like, subscribe, share with your friends. We could all use a little hand, you know, a little education when it comes to deer hunting to help us get better and more successful. So thanks for being here, and we'll see you guys in the next video.